Imagine this, ma'am. Step away from the property. An officer barks as Karen, wild-eyed and furious, jabs a finger at me. That's him. He's trespassing on our HOA's land. Arrest him. 3 sheriff SUVs have my barn surrounded, their red and blue lights pulsing across the weathered wood. Neighbors peer from behind curtains or stand brazenly in driveways, phones out, filming the drama. I'm leaning casually against my ranch gate, arms crossed, boots caked in dust, a faint smirk tugging at my lips. When the cops approach, I don't budge. Instead, I say, cool as a breeze, this land, all 200 acres, it's mine. The officer falters. You own all of it? Yep, I nod, including the exact spot Karen's standing on. Her face drains of color, and I slide a folder from my truck deeds titles, maps. As the cops scan the papers, Karen's smugness crumbles. Before they can speak, she lets out a shriek and bolts toward the HOA clubhouse like she's in a bad movie. How did we end up here? With a pearl-clutching, tracksuit-wearing HOA queen calling the law on me, the rightful owner. Let me take you back to the start of this wild ride. Which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any confrontation with the HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. I'm Jacob Miller, 41, a low-key ex-military guy who just wants to live quietly on my Arizona ranch, tending cattle and tinkering with old tractors. This 200-acre spread has been in my family for 3 generations, once nothing but open plains and cattle trails. But over the years, developers crept in, and suburban homes started sprouting like weeds around my land's edges, mushrooms after rain. They created what they called a luxury rural living community called Desert Springs, Meadows HOA, run, of course, and me, I still had my ranch in the middle of all of it. At first, I thought it was a blessing. My property value went up. I had neighbors now, which was a nice change, and most of them were all right young couples, retired folks, hard-working families. Then came Karen, her real name Amanda Whitmore, but around here, everyone just called her Karen. She became HOA president within 3 months of moving in. How? I have no idea. Maybe it was the cupcakes she brought to meetings, or her relentless need to control everything from grass height to what type of mailbox was acceptable. The first time we met, she marched straight to my porch with her clipboard. You need to paint your barn red, she told me. It's the HOA standard for uniformity. I blinked. I'm not part of the HOA. She stared at me like I had grown a second head. But this is Desert Springs Meadows. No ma'am, this here's Miller Ranch, been in my family since 1931. She turned around without a word. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, things started changing. A new gate appeared at the edge of my gravel road. HOA signboards popped up near my fences. Then one morning I found HOA newsletters in my mailbox, addressed to Dear Homeowner. At first I laughed it off, but the final straw came when I found a notice duct-taped to my barn. You are in violation of HOA Code 7.4, unauthorized storage of farm equipment. Please remove unsightly machinery within 72 hours. Now I know kindness is important. I believe in being the bigger person. But there's a difference between being kind and letting people walk all over you. I went to the HOH meeting that month. I sat in the back, quiet, waiting for the right moment. Karen stood in front, talking about community flower beds and the urgent Need for all homes to repaint their fences. Excuse me, I said, raising my hand. Karen blinked. Yes, I'm not part of this HOA. Never signed anything. Why am I getting notices? She smiled like she was talking to a confused child. You live in Desert Springs Meadows. That means you're under our jurisdiction. It's automatic. I leaned forward. I've got the original property records. My land predates this community by 70 years. I'm not under any HOA. That's when she snapped. Then maybe you should consider selling your land and moving somewhere else. We're trying to build a community here. I didn't answer. I just walked out. But I knew something had changed. The next few days were peaceful to peaceful. Then I started noticing strange things. The water on the west side of the property started acting funny, pressure, dropping mud in the pipes. I called the plumber, and we found the HOA had rerouted a drainage system without telling me. They said it was for community irrigation improvements. I tried to stay calm, but the part that hurt the most was that it didn't stop with me. The HOA started bullying other people too. My neighbor, Miss Clara, an 82-year-old widow who'd lived there even longer than me, got fined for having too many garden gnomes. Another family was told they couldn't have a blue car in the driveway because it clashed with the HOA's aesthetic. That's when I decided I had to do something, not just for me, but for everyone they were pushing around. I went down to the county records office. It took days. I dug through everything. Land titles, community development maps, zoning permits. And that's when I discovered something shocking. The HOA had been using part of my land as their community greenbelt. It was even on their maps. The clubhouse, my land. The parking lot where Karen parked her Tesla, my land. The little flower garden she bragged about at every meeting, still my land. I owned it, every inch of it, and I had the papers to prove it. I didn't tell anyone just yet. I waited until one day I decided to test how far Karen would go. I parked my old pickup by the clubhouse on my land and started unloading hay bales. Just a few, enough to make a statement. Karen came running like her heels were on fire. You can't do this, she shrieked. This is community property. No, I said. This is mine. That's when she called the cops, and we're right back where we started. The officers stood quietly reading the documents I gave them. Karen was yelling something about me being aggressive and dangerous, but I could tell they were beginning to see the truth. But before they could even respond, Karen took off running toward the clubhouse, yanking out her phone, dialing someone, and then bang, a loud sound echoed across the field. Everyone turned. Smoke started rising from the east side of my ranch. My hay barn was on fire, and that's when everything changed. I dropped the file. The officers shouted into their radios, running toward the smoke. Karen froze mid-step, her phone still pressed to her ear. Her face turned from anger to shock, then panic. I didn't waste time. I sprinted across the field, my boots thudding hard against the dry earth. Smoke billowed thick from the old hay barn, black and furious. My lungs burned before I even got close. Flames licked the edges of the wooden frame like hungry wolves. That barn had been built by my grandfather. It held bales of hay feed, a few tools, and my dad's old tractor. Rusty, but still kicking. Neighbors began rushing out with hoses and buckets, trying to help, but the fire was moving fast, too fast. I could feel the heat from 30 feet away. A fire truck screamed down the road, tires kicking up dust as it skidded to a stop. Firefighters leaped out, already pulling hoses and shouting commands. I backed away, helpless, heart pounding. It was all happening too fast. Karen stood frozen near the clubhouse, still clinging to her phone. Trembling, I locked eyes with her for a second. I saw something flicker in her gaze. Guilt, maybe, or fear. I didn't know yet, but something wasn't right. Hours later, the flames were out, the barn gone, the tractor melted metal and ash. The fire chief approached me while I stood with my arms crossed, staring at the smoldering wreck. "Looks like someone lit a fire from the back," he said, voice low. "We'll investigate, but between you and me, it wasn't accidental." I nodded. My lips were tight. I didn't say anything. The cops asked a few questions. Karen denied. Everything said she was on the phone, reporting me when the fire started, claimed she didn't even know where I kept my hay, but I wasn't a fool, and the next morning I found the final piece that sealed it, a camera. A small one tucked under the roof edge of my nearby shed. I had forgotten all about it. It wasn't even high-tech, just an old trail cam I used for spotting coyotes. It still worked, and it caught exactly what I thought it might: a teenage boy tossing something flaming into the barn. He wore a hoodie, but I could make out his sneakers, bright neon green. I'd seen them before on the feet of one of the neighborhood boys, who often hung around Karen's property. I went to the police, showed them the footage. They opened an arson investigation that same day. But that's not even the craziest part. Because while I was dealing with the fire and the investigation, HOA members began showing up at my door one by one, knocking sheepish, uncomfortable. "Mr. Miller," one man said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I didn't know they built the clubhouse on your land." "Did you know they planted the flower garden over your fence line?" asked another woman, clearly shaken. It was like a domino effect. As word spread that I owned more land than anyone realized, the community began to turn, not in anger, at least not at me, at the HOA. Karen stopped showing her face in public for a few days. I figured she was either hiding out or meeting with her lawyer, but I didn't stop. I kept digging. I went back to the county office, cross-referenced every HOA permit, every development boundary, and sure enough, the entire HOA infrastructure was built partially on my land: the clubhouse, the playground, half of their walking trail, all on land they never purchased or leased my land. That's when the lawyer got involved. I contacted Mr. Donwar, a nonsense land use attorney from Flagstaff. He looked through my documents, the satellite photos, the deeds. "This is one of the clearest cases I've seen in 20 years. He said they built on your property without permission. That's trespassing. And if they've collected HOA dues to maintain it, it's fraud, too." I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You're saying I could legally shut down their operations, sue them, evict them from every inch?" Yes, I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But sometimes people don't understand boundaries until you draw them in ink and bring them to court. So I gave the HOH 2 options. Option A: vacate all structures on my land and pay a usage fine for the past 7 years. Option B: lease the land from me under a new binding agreement with me as landlord. Karen didn't respond. Instead, she doubled down that weekend flyers were taped on everyone's doors. "Jacob Miller is threatening our community. He's trying to bankrupt us with fake land claims. We must stand together." She called an emergency HOA meeting. I showed up. The room was packed, standing room only, tension so thick you could cut it. Karen stood at the front, arms folded, lips pursed. "He's trying to bully us with lies and lawyers," she said loudly. "He wants to take away our park, our clubhouse, our community." I stepped forward. "I don't want to take anything. I just want what's mine, and I have proof." Then I handed copies of the land survey to the crowd maps, titles, documents. I'd made sure everyone could see. The room went quiet. Karen snatched a page from a woman in the front row and scanned it, her face draining of color again. You forged this," she said weakly. "No, I didn't," I said, "and if you really want to take this to court, I welcome it." Her jaw tightened, and then, without warning, she stood, looked at the crowd, and said, "This meeting is over." She stormed out, but the room didn't move. People turned to me, asking questions, asking how to fix it, how to make things right. I told them calmly, clearly, this isn't about hate, it's about fairness, and we can fix it together. The meeting ended with handshakes, apologies, a few tears, but just when I thought things might settle the next morning, a letter arrived by courier. It was from the HOA's new legal representative. They were suing me, claiming I had encroached on their property, and they were demanding I demolish my ranch gate and remove my fencing. I stared at the paper, then I laughed, because I knew something they didn't know. My next move was going to shake the entire neighborhood to its core. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, staring out across the early morning fog rolling over my fields. The charred skeleton of my hay barn was still smoldering faintly in the distance, but that wasn't what had my attention. No, it was the letter sitting on my kitchen table. The HOA had officially sued me. They claimed that I was trespassing on their land, that my ranch gate, yes, the same gate that had been there since before most of them were born, was an illegal structure, that my fencing crossed into HOA jurisdiction. I wasn't angry. I was fascinated, because this letter told me two things. One, they had no idea what kind of paperwork I'd been gathering for weeks. And two, Karen was desperate. I called my lawyer, Donald Ree. He chuckled the moment I read the first line. "This is great," he said. "It means they're walking into court. That's exactly where we want them. But they're twisting the narrative." I said, "Now people think I'm the problem. Jacob, let them. We'll hit them with the truth so hard. Their HOA meetings will have to be held in a tent." I hung up and got to work by noon. I'd filed a formal counterclaim, not just against the HOA, but specifically against its board members. Karen was listed at the top. The claim included trespassing, land misappropriation, unapproved construction, and defamation. I also included the fire footage in an affidavit. The local news caught wind of the drama. A few days later, I didn't speak to them, but Karen did. She stood in front of the HOA clubhouse, again, on my land, talking to Channel 9 News, with her hands folded, eyes big and teary. "This man is bullying us," she said. "He wants to destroy the beautiful community we've worked so hard to build." That night I couldn't sleep, not because of the lawsuit, but because of something. I remembered my grandpa used to say, "Land remembers, and if you treat it right, it'll speak up for you." That gave me an idea. The next morning I met with a drone mapping service for $600. They did a full 3D aerial survey of the property lines. Every inch was measured to the exact GPS coordinate. By the end of the week, I had updated boundary overlays, precise location maps, and high-resolution images showing exactly how much of my land had been claimed and used by the HOA. Turns out, it was worse than I thought. Not only had they built their clubhouse and parking lot on my property, they had also extended underground water and sewage pipes across 2 full acres without permits. One of their nature trails even looped around the east edge of my pasture, where my cattle grazed. All of it on land that they never owned. It was all the ammunition I needed. We served them with a cease and desist order. The following Monday, the entire HO board was now in violation. They had 10 days to vacate or come to the negotiating table. Karen, she doubled down by Wednesday. I came home to find a chain and padlock on my own gate. She locked me out of my ranch. I stood there, stunned, staring at the shiny lock dangling off the gate latch. A fresh HO notice was zip-tied beside it, private. HO property, no trespassing. I almost laughed instead. I grabbed my phone and called Sheriff Daniels. He showed up 20 minutes later with 2 deputies. Karen arrived 10 minutes after that, shrieking like a banshee. The moment she saw my truck parked outside the gate, "That man is not allowed here," she yelled. Sheriff Daniels held up the land title. "Ma'am, this land belongs to Mr. Miller. You can't lock him out of his own ranch." Karen's voice cracked. "He's lying. That gate is HO. Access our bylaws. Your bylaws don't override county land records." The sheriff cut in. "Unlock it now." Karen refused, so he pulled out bolt cutters. Snip, the gate creaked open. I walked through slowly, like I was reclaiming a kingdom. Karen watched in horror, hands shaking. "You're going to regret this," she muttered. "I already did," I replied. "That's why I'm fixing it now." Word spread fast. The video of the sheriff cutting the padlock ended up on Facebook. Neighbors started calling me. Some apologized. Some just wanted to hear my side. But the tension didn't die down. 3 days later, I came home to find something even worse. A bulldozer sitting right in the middle of my front pasture. The engine was still warm. It had been used recently. My fence had been knocked over. Cattle, scattered hoofprints all over my driveway. I called the county office. No construction permits had been issued. I checked the HO website. Sure enough, they had announced early development for a community amphitheater on my land. That's when I snapped. I drove to the HOA office, stormed into their meeting with a folder full of documents, and fire in my gut. "Everyone, sit down," I said, loud and clear. Karen stood, trying to block me. "You're not authorized to. I own this land," I said, "and your bulldozer destroyed part of my pasture. You've got 24 hours to remove it, or I'm seizing it." The room went quiet. No one moved. Then Karen made a mistake. She smirked and said, "Go ahead, seize it. Let's see how far you get." So I did. With my lawyer's help, I filed a property damage claim and a lien against the HO's construction equipment. By Friday morning, the bulldozer was towed away by the county, not the HO, and by that afternoon, Karen was gone, disappeared. No one had seen her. Her house lights were off. Her mailbox overflowed. Some neighbors whispered that she'd taken a vacation. Others said she was hiding from the lawsuit. But she didn't vanish without leaving behind one last surprise. Because while I was walking the property lines the next evening, something caught my eye near the edge of the woods. A hole, a freshly dug one right near the fence that bordered the HO's newest model homes. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed down inside. Buried under a pile of branches and loose dirt were dozens of old HO documents, meeting notes, fines issued to residents, unfiled permits, and most damning of all, a signed document from 2 years ago showing that Karen knew the land was mine and built over it anyway. I stood there in the dark, heart pounding, gripping the papers, because I finally had the proof I needed. But I also knew, if she was willing to burn down a barn, what else was she hiding? And just as I climbed out of the hole, I heard a twig snap behind me. I froze. Every instinct from my military days kicked in. I turned. Slowly, flashlight beams slicing through the trees. For a split second, all I heard was the breeze rustling the leaves, then another snap closer. "Who's there?" I called out. my voice low but firm. No answer. I stepped back toward the fence, documents clutched under one arm, the flashlight in the other. My boots crunched the underbrush as I backed toward the open trail that led to the main path. A shadow darted past a tree, quick human height. "Hey!" I yelled, chasing after it for a few feet before thinking better of it. I wasn't about to go charging through the woods at night over a maybe. Instead, I returned to the house, locked the doors, and scanned the documents I'd found digitally, backing them up 3 different ways. I even emailed a copy to Donald, just in case. His reply was instant. "This is it. This is everything we need. Karen's done." But something still felt off. The next morning, the town was buzzing news of the bulldozer being towed. Bold headline read, "Oh, President vanishes after ranch scandal explodes." Neighbors who once ignored me now waved cautiously. As I passed, a few stopped to talk. "Mr. Miller," said a man named Greg from 3 houses down, "I just want to say I'm sorry for how this has gone. We didn't know the HOA was overstepping like this." "I appreciate it," I said honestly. Another woman, Tessa, shook her head. "You're not the villain, Jacob." It felt like the tide was shifting, but then came the call. "Sheriff Daniels, again. We need you to come to the station," he said. "Why?" "It's about Karen and your ranch." When I arrived, they brought me into a quiet room and played me a voicemail. It was left anonymously on their tip line. The voice was masked, digitally distorted, but the message was chilling. "She didn't disappear. She's hiding, and he's next. He knows too much." I swallowed hard. The sheriff leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, we're taking this seriously. Do you have enemies? Anyone who might want to shut you up?" "I didn't," I said. "But maybe now I do." That night, I didn't sleep. I paced the porch with a shotgun slung over my shoulder and a flashlight in my hand. At 2:13 a.m. headlights appeared on the ridge, a slow-moving car. No lights, just moonlight glinting off the roof as it crept along the dirt road that cut across the back of my property. I raised the scope on my rifle and got a good look. It was a silver SUV. Brand new. I couldn't make out the driver's face, but I noted the plates. They turned around before reaching the house. Donald called the next morning. "You need security, Jacob." "I've got it handled." I said. "No, I mean legal protection. We're filing for an injunction against the HOA. They're still technically operating, and that gives them power to keep stirring trouble. So we filed it." The judge reviewed the documents, including the ones I'd found buried behind the fence. That afternoon, the court issued a temporary restraining order against the HOA. All operations were to be frozen pending investigation. Karen, wherever she was to cease any and all involvement in HOA activities. The paper ran the headline that evening, "Rancher shuts down. HOA court grants injunction." It should have been a victory, but the next day something happened that flipped everything upside down. A man showed up at my gate, tall, clean-shaven, in a suit too expensive for our dusty town. He introduced himself as Mark Lewin, a regional developer. "Mr. Miller," he said, "I represent the investment group that funded Desert Springs Meadows. I believe you and I need to talk." I didn't trust him, but I listened, and what he told me made my skin crawl. "Karen didn't just build on your land out of ignorance," he said. "She was encouraged to. We had plans for full acquisition. The idea was, once you caved or sold, we'd develop the whole area." My eyes narrowed. "You're saying this was a setup?" "Not exactly," he said smoothly. "Let's just say it was incentivized." I clenched my fists. "So who else knew most of the board?" maybe not the residents, but Karen, she was fully aware. I leaned forward. Why are you telling me this now? Because we'd rather settle than go to war. You've got enough proof to ruin a lot of people's reputations, investors, city council members, HOA directors. But if we make you whole, and I mean really whole, maybe we can all walk away quietly. He slid a folder toward me. Inside was a check for $850,000 and a settlement agreement if I dropped the lawsuits and signed over leasing rights for part of my ranch. I stared at it. Mark shrugged. She's gone. You won't see her again. Let it go, Mr. Miller. Take the money. I didn't answer. I just closed the folder and handed it back. No deal. He looked at me almost impressed. Then, I guess we'll see you in court. And he walked away. I watched his SUV disappear down the road. Then I called Donald. Tear them apart. I said all of them. We filed an updated motion. Cut out completely, no lights, no heat, nothing. I stepped outside with a flashlight. The wires near the back shed had been sliced clean. Sabotage. I looked up at the stars, the air still and cold, because I realized something. This wasn't just an HOA war anymore. This was a cover-up. And Karen, she wasn't hiding. She was being protected. I stood in the dark breath, forming clouds in the cold night. My ranch was completely silent. No hum from the barn, no glow from the porch lights, just the eerie sound of crickets in the distance, and the occasional gust of wind rattling through the trees. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours restoring my backup generator, checking every inch of fencing, every barn lock, every shed door. Someone had been here. Someone had cut the wires deliberately and knew exactly where to do it, so I wouldn't notice right away. By sunrise, I called Sheriff Daniels. He didn't seem surprised. This is getting bigger than we thought, he said over the line. If someone's targeting your infrastructure, now it's not just about a land dispute. You're a threat to someone's money. What about Karen? I asked. Any new leads? She's off the radar, he replied. No credit card activity. Her car hasn't been spotted. Phones turned off, but that doesn't mean she's not close. I hung up and called Donald. Next, Mark Luan in the development group just filed a countersuit. He said they're trying to claim your boundary surveys are flawed. They've brought in a private engineer to contest them. I laughed bitterly. Let them. I've got decades of aerial photos and GPS logs. They can't erase that. Donald paused. Jacob, they're playing for time. If they can delay, frustrate you, maybe even scare you, they think you'll back down. Then they don't know me at all. That week, I doubled my security, motion lights, trail cams. Even an old buddy of mine from the army, Luis, came to stay for a while. We took turns watching the land at night, drinking black coffee, listening to coyotes howl. Luis had a calm way about him. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. Man like you, he said, staring out at the hills. They think you'll fold because you're alone, but they forget ranchers know how to hold the line. That same day, something incredible happened. Dozens of neighbors started showing up, families from the HOH community, young and old, many of whom had avoided me or even supported Karen in the past. They brought casseroles, coffee, letters of support. One guy, John, a father of 3, brought his toolbox and said, I want to help rebuild your barn. I didn't say much, just nodded, but my heart, it swelled. For years I'd been the quiet rancher out on the edge. Now I was something else, a symbol, maybe, a reminder that one man with the truth was stronger than a group with a lie. But peace didn't last long. On Thursday, I got a call from Donald, his voice urgent. we got the audit results back from the court filings. He said, "Jacob, this is worse than we imagined." How bad? Karen embezzled over $300,000 from the HOA. Blinked what she funneled community improvement funds into a shell company. Guess who else is on the board? Mark Lewin. Bingo. They've been using your land as leverage for personal profit for at least 4 years. But now we've got the paper trail. I didn't even have time to process that when I heard tires crunching up my driveway. I opened the door. It was Greg, the neighbor who'd apologized to me weeks ago. His face was pale. "They're putting up a fence," he said. "Who is the HOA board, or what's left of it?" "They hired contractors. They're putting up a massive steel fence across the south edge of your ranch." I jumped into my truck and drove out there fast, unloading beams and power tools. A huge stack of fencing material stood right on the edge of my cattle field. I stormed out of the truck. "Hey, you're trespassing. This is private land." One guy looked up, clearly uncomfortable. "We were just hired to follow. The site plan said this was HOA expansion property." "It's not." I pulled out my phone. "You got 5 minutes to pack up before the sheriff gets here." They didn't argue. 10 minutes later, Sheriff Daniels and 2 deputies arrived. They shut it down immediately. But the message was clear. They were still trying to push me, still trying to claim territory, still playing their dirty game. I was sick of it that night. I did something bold. I scheduled a public meeting on my ranch. I invited the entire neighborhood. I even printed flyers and hand-delivered them to each doorstep. Miller Ranch Community Meeting, Saturday, 5:00 p.m. Let's talk about the truth you deserve to know. What's happening? When Saturday rolled around, nearly half the neighborhood showed up. We set up folding chairs under the open sky, the burned frame of my old barn still visible behind us. Louise handled parking. Miss Clara, the elderly widow Karen, once fined for too many garden gnomes, brought cookies. I stood in front of them all. "This isn't just about land," I said. "It's about control, about people who use their power to steal from you, from all of us." Then I showed them the evidence, the embezzlement, the fake permits, the secret shell company, the maps, deeds, court filings. There were gasps, murmurs, then silence. "I'm not your enemy," I said, "but I won't let them take what's mine, and I won't let them keep hurting this community." People clapped. Not everyone, but enough, more than I expected that night. I slept better than I had in weeks. But the war wasn't over. Because early the next morning, just as the sun peeked over the hills, Luis shook me awake. "Jacob," he said, voice tight, "we got a problem." I grabbed my boots and followed him out to the pasture, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Spray painted across the side of my barn, in progress in blood-red paint, were 3 words. "You were warned." Next to it, a dead calf, poisoned deliberately. I clenched my fists so hard, my knuckles cracked. They had crossed a line. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was personal, and I was about to show them what happens when you push a quiet man too far. I dropped to one knee beside the calf. Its eyes were still open, frozen in shock. No sign of struggle, no sign of injury, just a foaming mouth and a collapsed body. "Poison, quick and cruel." Louise stood beside me, silent, fists clenched. I felt heat rising in my chest. Not just anger, pure, bone-deep rage. They didn't just want my land. Now they wanted to break me. I called Sheriff Daniels. He arrived with a deputy in less than 30 minutes, lips tight. When he saw the graffiti and the dead animal, "We'll get the vet to confirm poison," he said. "We'll dust for prints. But this is more than just vandalism. Now it's animal cruelty and criminal harassment." I nodded. jaw clenched. I'm pressing every charge I can. Luis and I buried the calf that afternoon. I didn't say a word the whole time. Just dug. The sun was high, but I felt cold by sundown. I had one goal: end this. I met with Donald the next morning in town, laying out every move we had left. This is escalating fast, he said. We need to push now. File the full lawsuit against the HOA board. Demand full court intervention. No more cease and desist. Go for dissolution. Take the HOA down completely. He nodded. We've got the proof: fraud, land misappropriation, illegal construction, harassment. Now, with the evidence of animal cruelty tied to the conflict, it paints a clear picture of retaliation. Good, I said. Do it. He opened his briefcase and slid a thick file across the table. I flipped it open. At the top of the first page: petition to dissolve Desert Springs Meadows Homeowners Association. I signed without hesitation. That same day we submitted it to the court. That night I walked the property again, armed, alert, angry. The messages had stopped, but I knew they were still watching, still planning. Then my phone buzzed. An anonymous number. I hesitated and answered. Static. Then a low voice, altered by software. You think this ends with a signature? Click. I stared at the screen, and then a strange feeling crept up my spine, a sense of being watched. I turned. Flashlight beam sweeping the trees. Nothing. But I didn't sleep that night, and the next morning I found out why. Because just after breakfast I got an email from a burner account. No name, no message, just a file attached. A video. I clicked and my stomach dropped. The video showed Karen not hiding, not in a different state, but sitting in the back seat of Mark Lewan's SUV. She looked pale, nervous, like she hadn't slept in days. Mark was talking, calm, smug, heel fold. Soon the sabotage is just pressure. The more he resists, the worse it gets. Once he signs, we develop. Everyone wins. Karen said nothing, but she was there, alive, present, listening, and that was all I needed. I downloaded the video, sent it straight to Donald and Sheriff Daniels. By noon, an official investigation was opened against Mark Lewan and the entire Desert Springs development group. They were now suspects in conspiracy to commit fraud, intimidation, and criminal damage. But that wasn't even the twist, because an hour later, I got another message from someone I never expected, a whistleblower, one of the contractors who'd worked on the HOA expansion projects. He sent me copies of emails, work orders, even audio from Karen herself, admitting they were building on stolen land. And then the final bombshell, a scan of a non-disclosure agreement signed by several board members, stating that they knew the HOA was illegally using land they didn't own and were expected to say nothing. It was over. I sent everything to the court. Donald filed an emergency motion, and just like that, we had a court date. The trial was set for the following week. Sheriff Daniels personally delivered subpoenas to the remaining board members. Karen, still missing publicly, but now officially under investigation. Mark trying to run damage control, but the leaks were too big to plug. Meanwhile, on the ranch, something amazing happened. The community came alive. John and his boys came back to finish the barn. Miss Clara showed up with pies and sweet tea. Even Greg and a few former HOA supporters helped repaint the gate that Karen's team had vandalized months ago. We were rebuilding together for the first time in years. The land felt alive again. The night before the trial, Luis and I sat on the porch. You nervous? He asked. No, I said, not anymore. Why not? I looked out at the fields glowing under the moonlight. Because this land speaks, I said. and it finally has something to say. The next morning, I walked into court with my head high. Karen wasn't there, but Mark was. He sat across the aisle, flanked by two lawyers. He looked shaken, tired. The judge reviewed the documents, the deeds, the drone surveys, the HOA bylaws, the evidence of fraud, the whistleblower statement, the emails, the photos, the poisoned calf report, the graffiti, the sabotage. All of it. Then came the moment we'd all waited for. Judge Harmon leaned forward and said, based on overwhelming evidence of mismanagement, fraud, criminal behavior, and violation of land rights, I hereby order the immediate dissolution of Desert Springs Meadows Homeowners Association. All structures and improvements made on Mr. Miller's land are to be vacated within 14 days. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. Mark slumped in his chair. I didn't smile, not yet, because there was one more surprise coming as I stepped outside. The courthouse reporters swarming me, microphones flashing. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up, and out of the back seat came Karen, handcuffed, pale. And when she saw me, she didn't say a word. She just looked down, as if the land itself had finally answered her back. But just as I turned to leave, Sheriff Daniels leaned in and whispered, "She's talking. And what she's saying you won't believe." I paused mid-step. "What do you mean she's talking?" I asked Sheriff Daniels. He adjusted his hat and leaned closer. "Karen spilling everything. She's scared and she wants a deal." "A deal?" "Yeah, she says she cooperate. Testify against Mark and the developers in exchange for a lighter sentence." My eyes narrowed. "Why now?" "Because she claims she didn't start the fire, didn't poison the calf. She says Mark ordered it, that he had people watching your ranch, that she was just the face of it all." I stared at Karen as she was walked into the building. She looked like a completely different person. Shoulders slumped, cheeks hollow, eyes full of regret. But I wasn't ready to feel sorry. Not yet. That afternoon, I sat with Donald in his office, watching the first official statement from Karen's deposition. I was told the land would be acquired, that Jacob Miller would sell. I was just following orders, she said, voice trembling. Mark promised bonuses, promised protection. But when Jacob didn't give in, he got angry. He said people like him just need pressure. I didn't think he meant fire or poison. She named names. Board members, contractors, even a city council rep who'd helped fast-track some of the HOA's fake zoning approvals. Karen's statement cracked the whole thing open. The sheriff's department launched full criminal investigations into the Desert Springs Development Group, while the FBI stepped in for the interstate fraud and wire transfer violations. Meanwhile, life on the ranch slowly returned to normal. The barn was nearly rebuilt. Stronger, taller neighbors brought over new hay bales. A local feed company donated tools and fencing supplies. My cattle grazed peacefully again, but there was still one thing I needed to do: stand in front of that burned patch of land and let it go. So one evening after the work crew had gone home, I took a folding chair, a cold sweet tea, and sat in silence, facing the charred ground where the fire had started. And for the first time in months, I smiled, not because of revenge, but because the land was mine. Again, undisputed, respected, safe. 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the county courthouse. The HOA was officially dissolved. All pending liens, claims, and dues against my ranch were removed. The community was now self-governed, free to organize a new board, or none at all, their choice. But more than that, they chose me. They voted without my asking and sent me a signed letter requesting that I serve as the honorary community liaison. "Not a president," Greg wrote, "just someone we trust." I accepted with one condition: No more hoes. Instead, we'd have quarterly potlucks under the barn's new roof. We had the first one that weekend. Kids ran through the grass. Elderly neighbors shared stories. Someone brought a banjo, and in the middle of it all, peace, real peace. But just as I sat back with Luis, sipping sweet tea and listening to the laughter, Donald approached with his phone out. "You might want to see this," he said. He played a news clip. Breaking: real estate mogul Mark Luan indicted on federal charges. FBI confirms whistleblower evidence led to uncovering over $4.2 million in fraudulent HOA funds laundered through shell companies nationwide. I raised my eyebrows. Nationwide? Donald nodded. Karen wasn't his only puppet. "Guess I was just the one who pushed back," I said. "You didn't just push," Luis added with a grin. "You kicked the whole house of cards down." We clinketed glasses. The stars above seemed clearer than they had in years as the fire crackled and neighbors shared stories. I looked around at a place that had once been silent, isolated, now filled with life. This land had seen fire, fraud, fear, and fought through it all. And as I watch kids chasing fireflies and Clara passing out her famous lemon bars, I realize something simple and true. They can steal a barn, poison a field, even try to rewrite history. But they'll never take the soul of a man who knows who he is, and they'll never, ever take his land.